Welcome back, everyone. This is another episode of Grid of the Diaspora, and I'm your host, Nakaira G. And today, this is going to be a really short episode, but I just feel like I want to get something off my chest. I feel like these diaspora wars are just getting out of hand, and I really want to talk about it. I want to talk about this whole FBA, ADOS thing. I want to talk about Pan Africanism, and I'm going to do my best to keep it like as short as possible. Obviously, you can see I'm in a new studio. Pretty much every show, I'm going to have like a different studio because I'm in between like 2 or 3 studios right now, testing them out, seeing which ones I like. But yeah, I want to talk about this FBA, this destruction that happens online. Is this a hate group? I have a couple other videos where I've talked about this before, but I didn't really go like super in depth because I was talking about specific issues that were happening at the moment. But let's get into it. Okay, so right when I was about to start this video, news came out about Malcolm Jamal Warner passing away from an accidental drowning. So I definitely want to say rest in peace and condolences to his family. That's really sad. Obviously, we know him from The Cosby Show and so many other movies. And we grew up with him and things like that, and that's really sad. I think his last video, at least, or interview that I've seen, was with Melissa Ford on her podcast. So that's really sad. That's really unfortunate. So, yeah, I wanted to start that off with a condolences. But let's get into this episode. So what really inspired me to talk about this today is because I feel like, especially during my time like in Ghana and just traveling around West Africa over the years, this conversation about Black identity, specifically Black American identity, seems to continue to be trivial for a lot of people, particularly within the African diaspora. And a lot of it, I think, is just thoughts online. A lot of it, I think, is just like invisible people that are using the internet. But there's also like another aspect to it, right, in the real world, in real life, where all of a sudden we're having this decade-old conversation again about what is Blackness, what does it mean to be Black, what does it mean to be African American, what does it mean to be all of these different things. And I think the reason why so many people are confused is because people don't seem to really understand that race one is not necessarily real in the sense of how it's portrayed to us, right? But then on top of that, there are historical things that have happened throughout history that have created new groups of identities, right? Blood mixing, tribes mixing, cultures mixing. And I think for a lot of people it is very confusing because when you have a place like, let's say China, for instance, there were different kingdoms within Asia that were already existing, and they went through different wars and conquering each other to be the countries that they are today. So America isn't the only place that has created an identity after conquering a certain land. Most lands in this world have done that, but America is more so the most recent. And I noticed that this is like has become like a pseudo intellectual talking point amongst a lot of different types of scholars or just social media content creators or just users online. And we're getting to this point where it's like, why are people defining what it means to be Black every single day online? Like online, on these TV shows, like in reality shows, it feels like we're constantly having the conversation of who's Black, who's the Black girl. The Love Island stuff and just all of the things that have been happening here in America with Trump, I'm noticing that this whole FBA crowd, which to me is really just the FBI or the CIA, you know, like I just feel like I'm really getting frustrated because it feels like the FBA, the Foundational Black American Groups, they're not necessarily helping the Black community in my experience. I feel like it's very divisive, right? And I feel like the whole concept of trying to separate Black Americans from Africa, I don't really see the point. And Mark Lamont Hill said this perfectly on Joe Budden's podcast, whatever, right? But he said it perfectly. He was like, I'm aware that we get our culture and we get like our memory and our history from Africa, but I also don't need Africa to understand who I am as a Black person. And I think for a lot of people, they take offense to that. And it's not being said in like an offensive way. It's just more so like, as Black Americans, we have done a lot of work to honor Africa. And everything that we do is literally a derivative of Africa. However, we have transformed and created new aspects of culture just because of different resources that we have and the circumstances that we have, you know. So the only difference between Africans on the continent, Africans in America, or African Americans, people who are descendants of the continent, the only difference is that Africans on the continent don't necessarily celebrate the culture that we have created in America in the same way that we celebrate it, right? And so for other people listening to hip hop and all that stuff, most people don't even realize that that is Black culture. Most people just think, oh, that's America. That's American music. That's America, without even really knowing that that is Black culture, right? The way that you wear your clothes, the certain brands that you do or don't wear, like the owners of certain brands, like just the way that we carry ourselves. We have so many things that we can say is our culture. But with the FBA movement, it's like they're doing this thing where they're like, oh, we're not Africans, you know, we've been, there were some of us that were already in America. And okay, cool. There were Native people that were in America, and there were enslaved Africans that came through the settlement, and the people that ran away mixed and protected themselves, and they created communities that still strive and still are alive today. Yes, that exists, right? But that is not the story for every single person in this country, right? And so there's this thing where it's similar to like Puerto Ricans and Dominicans. Everybody is not African, right? Everybody is not Black. Every Puerto Rican and Dominican is not Black, right? Depending on your bloodline, your heritage, what your story is, you can have a different percentage of all these different things. That's how they identify themselves. And so I find it so interesting with the FBA movement, the Black Hebrew Israelites, the ADOS movement. I feel like when the conversation was being had about reparations, that's when these groups were voicing their opinions about who deserves what reparations, why, from who, and how to divvy up what that looks like, because in America we have so many other descendants of enslavement in the country, you know, after spending generations in another country like Jamaica or Brazil or whatever, right? And so I thought that that's where it was going to start and stop. But it seems like now it has created like hate groups online, pseudo intellectual groups online, pseudo science groups online, where they're actually using like racial stereotypes or honestly just kind of like eugenics to try to differentiate what is an African person and what is an African American. I'm so sorry, but like there's no part of my identity as a Black person where I don't consider myself African, right? Regardless of passport and citizenship and knowing which, you know, kingdom you come from and all that stuff. That is okay for the people who have that lineage and people who do the DNA test and all that stuff. But I just feel like there is some form of divisiveness that is happening online. And even just with the whole Essence Fest and Jay Versace and all of that, I'm just like, what is going on? What is the goal for people? You know, and that's why, you know, I identify as a Pan Africanist, because it's like, I understand that as a Black person in America, I am the same as a Black person in Jamaica. I'm the same as a Black person in Brazil, and vice versa. And, you know, anywhere that touched where enslavement touched anywhere, where Africans have touched, whether enslaved or not, freed or not, right? You know, on the wrong side or the right side of the spectrum of history or not, like, I'm still an African person. So I hope that, like, and I also am noticing that when, for a lot of us that are traveling to Africa, there are a lot of people who identify as Black Hebrews, FBAs, and all that stuff. And sometimes when they're talking about Black Americans, they will group us all together. And I just want to make it clear that, like, we're not all grouped together. Like, I am not an FBA, I'm not an 80 by definition. But by definition, maybe because I am a descendant of enslavement. But however, I do not use that to single myself out or to separate Africans. I think that there are positive and productive ways to honor Black American history while also pointing out that our history is still very entangled with imperialism. So even though we have created things against the imperialism or anti-imperialism, right? Even though we have created things that go against, you know, the white institutions, but at the end of the day, we still have to be mindful that this is still within an imperialist regime, right? And who we are outside of the imperial structure is where I think Blackness really lies. And so, as long as all of us, whether you're on the continent, you're on this continent, wherever you are, if you are still existing under colonialism, under imperialism, under tribalism, under whatever aspect of oppression, your identity and your background and your heritage and your culture and all of that can be challenged at any moment, because at the end of the day, a lot of our identities oppresses another group or is in a hierarchical structure of another group simply because we are in imperialism. So I just wanted to leave that with people because I feel like a lot of the videos that I've been doing recently have touched on this a little bit, but I don't really go super in depth when I'm doing like current event topics. But this in particular, I really just wanted to talk about because I'm really tired of like even just seeing the word FBA anywhere online and anywhere near a intellectual conversation. I find it to just be very divisive. And I feel like a lot of people who have not had the opportunity to travel to Africa talk like this, and even a lot of people who do travel to Africa talk like that, you know, with a very divisive mindset. And it's like, are there things that make us different? Sure. But at the end of the day, what is the goal for people? Are FBA people trying to be in solidarity with Black people regardless and educate Black people regardless and work with each other? Or are you guys just trying to become the new oppressor? And because right now, FBA people and Republican Trump people have the same talking points. They have the same racial stereotypes. They have the same racist, eugenics, like talking points. There's the same level of anti-Blackness. There's the same level of xenophobia, like all of these things. And it's just a group that I don't want to be affiliated with. So I just want to make sure that people don't ever affiliate me with that, because that's just not what we're doing over here. So make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. Make sure you visit my website at griotofthediaspora.com/shop. Okay. I have shirts, I have t-shirts and all that stuff, books, I have notebooks, I have bags and all of that. I also have my handmade press-on nails that I make myself, so make sure you check that out. Until next time, guys.